So Joe, I've said in the past, like that when we have tax professionals on, I like having repeat people talking about similar topics because there's always a different take. And we've recently had a personal branding episode come out, but Alejandro also has a different take. And I just love getting different expert opinions, even if we have similar topics, because everybody has a different take. So Alejandro, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I am excited. I've been listening to several episodes of the podcast. I love the business, life first business mindset that you guys have. I love the solopreneur resources that you're providing because solopreneurs need all the help they can get. So I am very excited for this conversation.
I have a question, though, before we get in. I have a question.
Yes.
Are we talking about personal branding or taxes?
Personal branding.
Okay. I just want to, somebody might be listening going, oh, you know what? I don't care about taxes.
Yeah. Sorry. What I was trying to say is we've had a lot of tax episodes and people are like, well, there's a lot of these. And it's like, no, but there's always a different take. And we just recently released another personal branding episode. So I want people to know that this is different than that personal branding episode and every personal branding episode before, because it's so important. And even if we release the same episode over and over and over again, it needs to get in your head. So we were talking about personal branding. Thank you so much for the clarification. But before we get into all of our juicy questions, I do have an icebreaker question for you. And it actually revolves around personal branding. If you had to build a personal brand from absolute zero, no contacts, no credentials, no social media, but you had 90 days and $100, what would you do first?
I love this question. And my answer has changed in the past few years because it used to be create really good SEO content that would compound over time, especially as a solopreneur, you need those kind of activities. But recently that has changed. And my answer would be to go on a podcast tour. And you can do that with less than $100. I would say you probably need some type of equipment, maybe a good camera. Then the other use of that money would be probably buying a list so that you can go on podcasts. But a podcast tour, without a doubt, is the best thing you can do because it helps you transfer trust. And this is going to be meta because we're in a podcast, but it helps you transfer all the trust that the host has built with the audience, if you do it right and if you serve the audience, to the guest. In a podcast tour is usually, the way we frame it is at least 10 episodes in 90 days, a lot of prep work so that you know you're going to deliver value. And you can do it essentially for free because what you need to do is to do the work so that you're informed about the good podcasts in your industry, do the work of preparing so that you serve the hosts and you serve the audience. And then the value is going to compound because the content lives forever in those podcasts. You can repurpose the content, especially if it's video. Nowadays with AI, it's super simple. I think we're still on budget because 100, maybe 50 for the list on Fiverr, $20 for ChatGPT or Claude. And the other $20, I would say, would probably be an Opus Clip or one of these AI tools that you just put the video and it clips it. Because then you have the content, you're telling the stories, and you're going to get links and mentions that are incredibly valuable nowadays for AI. So, solopreneur, you don't have a lot of time. You go on this 30-minute, 1-hour episodes, and you're basically creating so much value that's going to compound over time. And we can talk more about that. There's a lot more to it, but I'll leave it there and see where you want to take it.
Hey, just one thing, you mentioned getting a camera, but you know what? I'm using my iPhone as my camera on this podcast.
And that's interesting. How did you connect it to your computer?
I'm using Riverside.
Of course.
Connects wirelessly. And I think you might be able to do it with Zoom, which a lot of video podcasts use.
Yes.
Zoom. So it's, I haven't done deep research because of the tool we're using. It basically makes it easy for me, but it's a 4K camera, so it gives me as high a resolution as I want. It's,
absolutely.
So great camera, and I already had it in my pocket.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe
So
that
then
was
you
just
just
the
need to buy something to hold it.
Yeah, I've got a $22
Tripod, yeah.
selfie stick that I had from, when I went on vacation 10 years ago. It expands. It's a selfie stick that expands into a tripod, but that was not part of the business investment. I bought that for vacations before taking selfies was considered.
But it would fit it
Whatever.
in the $100 instead of buying a camera.
would.
You can use your
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah.
I can't believe that
Yeah.
was just the icebreaker question because that was already so much value. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us about your journey. You've said you were an introverted immigrant, and now you've been named one of the top 6 personal branding experts to follow. So what was kind of the turning point where you stopped trying to fit in and started building a brand around who you actually are?
Well, growing up, I thought I was going to be a professional basketball player. And for a while, I was checking the boxes because my mom played for the national team in Venezuela. That's where I grew up. I was playing state. I was the only kid in my high school. When I was in middle school, I was playing with high schoolers already, and I was the only kid playing state level championships. And all of the guys I was playing with at that time ended up in the national team. But I don't know if you can see from the camera. Let me put myself next to the door. I'm not short, but I'm not basketball player level tall. So I had to switch strategies. And throughout all the time, I had not been a good student, but then life has a way to sometimes push you out of your comfort zone. In my case, it was the same push that me and other 10 million Venezuelans got because of everything that was going on in the country. And I'll summarize it with 3 very negative records that we broke. The first one is that we had over 1 million% inflation in 1 year. So imagine we were struggling in the US in the past years with close to 10% inflation. That's 2 digits. Imagine what 7 digits does to your life. For people to get an idea, that's you go into the grocery store, and as you walk to the aisle to get the product that you want to get, the price is going up. You get the product, you walk back to pay for it, the price is still going up in that time. So it just destroys the economy of the country. The second record, we had more than 30% GDP drop in 1 year. Usually that happens, economies that study this phenomenon, it's usually a natural disaster or a war that causes this. None of that happened in Venezuela. The economists cannot explain why. We know why. It was because of the dictatorship regime. And the third negative record that we broke is the refugee crisis. More than 30% of the country, more than 10 million people has left the country. I'm one of those. This is the biggest crisis of this side of the world. So that happened to me. I had family here in Houston. I landed at the University of Houston, which transformed my life. And my plan was, I just need to get good grades. If I just get good grades, I'm going to have a good career. And I quickly learned that is just the baseline requirement. You have to have a good skill for you to have a good career. But the key is how you communicate it, how you come across. I learned all these concepts of networking, your 30-second pitch, having stories. So I went all in during my MBA because if I failed, my mom was waiting for me back home in Venezuela with a chancla in her hand.
With a what?
And I don't know a chancla, I don't know if you know what a chancla is. A chancla is a flip-flop. But in the hands of a Latino woman, it becomes a mythical device, a mythical motivation device that moms can use to throw it at their kids and hit their head when they don't do what they're supposed to do. So I went all in. I immersed myself in the program. It was my new home. They totally transformed my life. And after the program, I started a business helping other people doing what I had to go through because it was such a transformation for me. I had to do improv comedy classes. I had to go to Toastmaster. I had to get as much help as possible because I was not only dealing with a new language, but with a total new culture, new way of doing things. So I started doing it for myself, building my personal brand by building my communication skills. And then that's when I realized that other introverts and immigrants who want to start a business need the same help. And that's why I do what I do right now.
It's so funny because, and I know introverted doesn't mean like that's where you get your like energy from, is like being alone. It doesn't mean you're not outgoing, but I would not take you for an introvert. And maybe it was practiced through all those years, but you don't strike me as one.
People say that, and it's true because I've worked on it. These things don't come naturally to me, and I had to be in the US. But the key difference is that I have to go into my cave and recharge. For example, if I go into a conference, I have to, okay, turn it on. Let's go. Let's have the conversations. Let's ask the questions. But then I have to go home and recharge. It doesn't energize me to be around people, but I've learned to do it.
Got it. Okay. Well, so
Can I
you
ask a
created,
question? Can I ask a
please.
quick question? Do you enjoy it?
I enjoy it now and enjoy it especially in this setting. I don't enjoy the networking events and the conferences where you have the same conversations over and over again that are just surface level conversations. But this I could do for hours and hours. I could have a coffee chat with someone because then I get to ask the deep questions and really learn about the other person. So I don't enjoy the group setting type networking, getting to know each other. But when it's one-on-one and we have the opportunity to go deep, it fills my heart, it fills my soul, and I can do it all the time.
Okay, I'm so glad we've kind of pivoted to sales and networking a little bit, because so many solopreneurs struggle with talking about what they do in like networking settings or not, because they feel salesy or bragging or whatever. So do you have a framework for communicating your value in a way that feels natural rather than performative, like if you're at a big conference?
The key is to tell a story. And I know it's kind of like a buzzword now, storytelling, and everybody's kind of like mentioning it and using it. But I've gone deep into this by reading a lot of books on writing from people who write novels. I was in a program for about 2 years to really understand stories. And what you need to do to not be salesy is to have an inciting incident and the turning point progressive complication before you get to the sale. And what that means, the inciting incident and the turning point and the progressive complications, what that means is that you need to put yourself in whole at the beginning of the story so that then people connect with that problem and then the solution is not salesy. So if I talk about personal branding and what I do and all my accolades at the beginning, that is what is salesy. That is what people don't want to do because it feels too self-promotional. But when you understand, or at least when you adopt the perspective that what you're doing it to actually help other people, then it's easy to talk about it. But you put yourself in the same spot with the inciting incident than your audience and all the problems that you're facing. And then when they relate to that, it's easier to say, hey, by the way I've solved this problem of being a solopreneur, an immigrant, and an introvert is doing this. This might work for you too. So I think that is the way that you get past, hey, feeling selfie and feeling braggy. You take it out of yourself, the focus, because it's not about you. It's about the person that you have in front of you that you're trying to help. If you know that a little bit of motivation, a little bit of telling your transformation or the transformation that you do for clients is going to help that person take the step, then it's super easy because you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for the other person.
No, that makes so much sense. So another thing I want to pivot to a little bit just with the personal brand is that a lot of solopreneurs feel pressure to kind of project a polished, like perfect professional image of themselves. And let's pivot from in person to online. And you've spoken about dropping the mask. So how do you decide what to share authentically versus what to keep private when your personal brand is your business because you're a solopreneur?
It's a process. It does not come easy at the beginning. And you should share as much as you feel comfortable doing so. And there are many examples out there. One of the biggest personal brands right now, I think everybody knows who he is, Gary Vaynerchuk. He shares a lot about what he does, right? He shares his everyday life. I do not feel comfortable doing that, for example. And he does. But if you think about it, even though he shares a lot of his life, he does not share his personal life. You've never seen a post of him and his kids or about his kind of like really, really private life. So you have to understand that there are many, many ways to do it. And you just got to start doing it slowly and get comfortable. And then at some point, what happens is that you understand that to connect with people, you need both. You need to be vulnerable. So there's the warmth component. And then you need to share about your expertise so that there's the competence component. There's a ton of research on how those two things together are the things that create trust. And this happens a lot to people that we just share the competence component. Here are 3 things you should do. Here's my expertise. Here's a framework. But if nobody cares, if nobody connects with the human that's on the other side and the problems that they faced, it's not going to land. So there's kind of like a Goldilocks process that you have to go through of you're probably going to start with the expertise. It's not going to resonate that much. Slowly, you're going to see other people sharing personal things. You're going to feel empowered to do so. People connect with you. And that's how you incorporate warmth and competence into every message that you share. And then it starts to resonate.
Yeah, it's just the building blocks.
And you see those people all over like YouTube and Facebook, these ads pop up and it's like, you got to do these 3 things. And I just click, next, because it's like you say, they're just basically coming out with their expertise, but there's no relationship. There's no trust. There's no, are you a real person telling me a real thing? I totally agree. That's a really, really important, but yeah, a little bit of a dance, right? To figure out where, what do people care about too? I mean, I could share all kinds of stuff about my life that people would be like, well, I'll use this podcast to go to sleep.
Well, and Alejandro, I keep looking at your shirt with a big UH on there, and you teach at the University of Houston, and you've spoken at places like the SEC. How did you build that kind of credibility on your own? And you talked about Toastmasters and all of that, but what can solopreneurs learn from your path to stand out when they're a solopreneur and they don't have a big team or anything behind them?
Biggest thing I did at the beginning was to show up for others and believe. You have to believe in yourself and you have to believe that you have what it takes to be in situations to show your expertise, but at the same time to be there for others. So something that I did while I was in business school, they had this program called the Bauer MBA Ambassadors. There were students who were doing good in the program, who the program used to kind of go to the events with prospective students so that prospective students could ask questions to the Bauer MBA ambassadors. And I remember at some point we had like several ambassadors and we all had to kind of like fill a quota and go to certain events, what was part of like the agreement. And at some point, the team asked me to stop going to events so other people could go so that they could fill their quota. Because in my head, in those 2 years, it was, you got to be focused. These are the things that you need to do. And if you do it then repeatedly, you are going to build the expertise and the social capital. So what I did at the beginning was to volunteer for anything. They needed someone in a panel, I would volunteer for it. They needed someone to present, because usually most people don't want to present. Most people don't want to do a podcast. Most people don't want to do a presentation because it's scary. Public speaking is the number one fear for a reason. And if you do it and you do it well, it's kind of like a superpower. So I started by volunteering to any opportunity to be in front of people and work on the skill set. And slowly, because I got better, then at the university, they started inviting me, hey, let's invite Alejandro to the panels to be in front of prospective students. And then they needed somebody to teach a workshop on networking for international students. And they asked me to come and I would come. And then some of the professors wanted me to go do some guest lectures on presentation for some classes, and I would do it. And then slowly that built up to the point where when they needed someone to teach at the executive MBA some of these concepts, I came to mind, and that's kind of like how that happened. And same with the SEC. That was an event that happened at Bauer that they were talking about solopreneurs and businesses and how to raise capital. And again, I came to mind because I had been doing the work for so long. It's not sustainable, I would say, to any solopreneur out there. I was very young at the time. I didn't have kids, so I could put all my focus into it. I think now the way I'm doing it is I'm trying to make it a drip that doesn't stop. I'm not just like opening it up all the way and putting all my energy. It's just a drip. I try to go 1 to 2, between 1 and 4 podcasts every month. I try to do live presentations, webinars, a little bit of everything just to keep the skill set alive. But you do need to create momentum, at least at first. And the most important thing is to believe that you have something valuable to say.
Okay, so for the other self-proclaimed introverts out there, they know they need to be on podcasts. They know they need to be speaking. They know they need to be visible, but they're also shy. And again, being an introvert and being shy are not the same thing. What is your pep talk for people being like that know they need to get out there, but they just have such a mental block with it?
You have to address it from both sides. You have to address it from the skill side, and you have to work on your stories. I rehearse, like I know these stories like the back of my hand, and I still rehearse them a little bit before every episode because I need to make the story meaningful to you and to your audience. So I have my stories that I know are good. I'm going to tell them. But before this episode, I did the work. I listened to an episode, the episode with Elisa Rogers about building a business without losing your peace. I love the Jonathan Stark episode. He talked about Alan Weiss. I love Alan too and his books. I went through both of your profiles. I went through your website. I learned about your the lifestyle program that you have for solopreneurs. So, and I have, you don't see it, but I have notes everywhere to remind me of the things that I need to touch on. So you need to prepare a lot more than other people as an introvert. If you're an introvert, you're not good at it. You know you're gonna have to put the work. At least at first, you're gonna have to work a lot more than an extrovert that is just comfortable going off the cuff and improvising it. So I would say the first thing that you need to do to get comfortable is to work on your stories. Have at least 2, 3, 4 good stories that you know you can tell. Practice them. Practice the beginning, especially of the stories and the transitions. And we'll share a resource, by the way, for anybody who's struggling, who thinks they want to go on podcasts and they're not comfortable with it, so that they can build their stories. But you just have to practice and put in the work at the beginning. That's the number one thing. And then the second thing is to focus on the audience. And I do this a lot when I have to go and do an improv comedy show. And in improv comedy, you have no idea what's going to happen. A lot of people confuse it with stand-up. It's not stand-up. It's closer to a Friday night, let's say Saturday Night Live. It's closer to that because it's improvised. You have no idea. It's theater. You're in front of people. You have no idea what's going to happen. And it's very scary because not only you have to perform, but you have to be funny without knowing what's going to happen. And there's usually a little bit of nerves when I'm in that position. Same when you're going to do a presentation and you're thinking, what if there's somebody in the audience that knows more than me about this topic? What if they ask me a question that I don't know the answer to? And then your brain goes into fear. And the solution is to always think about at least one person in the audience who maybe they're having a bad day. In the case of improv for me, maybe they're having a bad day. Something really bad happened in their life. Maybe they lost their job. They got some bad news. They came to the show. What if I can make them laugh, get entertained, get engaged, and just forget about that for a second? That, if you focus on that, then you're not worried about you and if you're going to do good or not. Same in a professional setting. I've been invited. I once was invited to speak at the Texas Lyceum. And I had everything prepared. And then I went to the pre-conference, and in the room, there were some of the top lawyers, some of the top CEOs of the banks in Texas. There were some politicians, people who had way more experience than me. And I was nervous. And I remember thinking, well, if just one person from the audience gets something valuable out of the story that I'm going to tell, then I made it. I made someone's life a little bit better. And that's all it takes. So taking the focus, doing the work so that you're confident in that you've done the work and you prepared, and then changing the focus in what's in it for me and what are people going to think of me to how is it that people are going to get value from this talk that I'm doing.
Question on that. So you are talking about introverts and how they struggle with all of these kinds of things, but is it maybe possible or true or sometimes true that the introverts, because they are worried about this stuff and do the prep work, might end up actually doing a better job than an extrovert that just walks in the room and feels like they're going to basically be fine because they aren't afraid and yet maybe aren't hitting the topics as crisply as somebody that does the prep work that an introvert is inclined to do.
Absolutely. And I think there's research, I'm forgetting the name, but there's actually a ton of research that proves that introverts can make better salespeople than extroverts because we're better listeners. That's another hack, for example, that I learned, that if you go into a conference or networking events and you're really good at asking questions, you don't have to talk that much. And it actually helps more if you make people share and feel good about themselves. So that is absolutely true. Introverts, again, it's not, people confuse introvertness with being shy, and those are two different things. Introvert is just, you're not that comfortable around people. And because of that, you don't practice a skill set as much. You're more comfortable in your own head, playing video games, reading books. So the only key thing is that you need to be intentional about practicing the skill set, because extroverts are talking all the time. They're talking to people, they're walking and doing it all. So they practice the skill set a lot more than us. That is the only thing. You need to be intentional about doing it, but it becomes a little bit easier.
They got to practice listening, right? The extroverts.
That's true. I am guilty on all fronts.
I'm curious, Carly, what would you say if for introverts, for example, it's harder to be around people, but we can do it well because if we prepare, we're good at listening and all of those things. From your side, what would you say is what extroverts struggle with, and how do you overcome that?
I think so. It's funny. I also did improv, and my thing that I had to overcome was I was always thinking about what I was going to say next, more so than what my partner, whoever was on stage, was saying. And you, like you said, you need to listen. And even in conversation, my husband is an introvert, and he's always like, I am not shy. People assume that because you just don't stop talking. So he never has the opportunity, because I'm always thinking of what am I going to say next to keep the conversation going. Like I'm not good with pauses. I want the conversation to flow. And if there's ever any silence or anything, I feel the need to fill it. And my husband's been a really good educator, being like, or you can just let it sit and like be okay with that silence and then see what comes from there. And he's been very patient with me over the years, because I'm like, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I would say that's a hard thing to overcome, because my default is what am I going to say next, not what are they going to say next that I need to pay attention to. It's basically the
Silas is
me
your
show.
friend.
Yes. Well, okay. So Alejandro, you sound like you have a lot going on, and it sounds like you've been setting boundaries a little bit more now, and have, instead of putting the faucet on all the way, it's just dripping. Well, we talk a lot about setting boundaries and the power of no as a solopreneur. But you've built Latinpresarios, you've given a TED Talk, and you teach at a university, and you have a family, all while being the face of your own brand. So how do you think about which opportunities to pursue now and which to turn down as a solopreneur to to protect your peace, like you were saying with Alyssa Rogers' episode?
Key for me is to batch your activities so that you know how much time you have for each of the things that you have to do, right? So you have to network, I have to prep for classes, I have to work in the business and on the business. So you have to be very clear about your capacity and your level of energy. And this is something that we are not taught. And this is coming from, I'm type A, I'm super competitive, I always want to win and I always want to look good. But you have to slowly, either if you're religious, you can do it through prayer. If you are not religious and for your spiritual, you can do it through meditation. If not, you can do it through therapy. There are many tools so that you can start listening to your internal voice and tune down those external voices. Because the majority of the problems come because either if you have siblings, you might be comparing yourself to your siblings, and this happens naturally. You might be comparing yourself with coworkers, classmates. You might have in your head the voice of your parents, the voice of your family telling you to do one thing, telling you to do the other thing. And the voice that matters most is your voice. And most of the time, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're someone who wants to be a high achiever, is that we are not kind to ourselves most of the time. If you talked to other people the way you talk to yourself, you will be in fights all the time. So that is the number one thing. You have to slowly really understand what is my capacity and how do I go instead of going at 100, 110, and 150 all the time, which is going to lead to burnout, how can I go at 85, 90 some days, 75 some days, 50 some days, if that's all you have, so that you can keep it going. Because the most important thing, and we all know this, is just one step after the other. So, and this is big picture. I'll give you a tactical example. I have a lot of people that call me because they want to have a coffee to get some help or advice on something they're going through. It might be a classmate that's struggling with their job search. It might be somebody who just started a YouTube channel and they want some feedback on their videos or their content strategy. It might be a student that just graduated from undergrad. They're thinking about doing grad school and they want some help. If it's somebody from Bauer, a student, a friend, somebody that I know, the answer is always going to be yes in my case. But it's usually on Fridays and it's when I have the time. So it might be, for example, Fridays are my day for the social activities, usually in times where there's no traffic. So if I have to go out, I make it easy for me. And then if, for example, for the next 2 weeks, I already have it booked, I have no problem. If somebody calls me like, hey, can we have coffee? I have this thing. Absolutely. Can you do in 3 weeks? Because that is when I have the allotted time for that activity. So the key to be able to do it is that you have to build the system in a way that you're actually enjoying it and you're looking forward to doing these things that you set up yourself to do. Because if not, if you're just pushing yourself because of this external voice of society or your parents that you have to do, it's going to be very, very hard to keep going.
So just to wrap things up, if a solopreneur listening to this who's very talented at what they do, but they're still very invisible in their industry, what would you say is the single most impactful thing they can do in the next 30 days to change that?
Single most impactful thing that they can do for what exactly? What result?
If they're super talented but they're still invisible in their industry, would it be podcasting from your first answer? Or is there another thing they could do that'd be impactful to get exposure over the next 30 days?
I am biased, of course, because it's what we do. But I would say that the best thing you can do right now, if you're in that position, is to go on a podcast tour. And I say this because if you're a solopreneur, you don't have a lot of time. You're doing a lot of things. So you have to be very, not only efficient, but effective with what you do. You have to move the needle. And you have to do it in a way that it compounds. For example, one of the things that we all do right away when either we jump to entrepreneurship or as we're doing it as a side hustle, if you're still in that phase and you haven't jumped all in, is that you start doing networking because it's what everybody says. Hey, go to events, talk about your business, pitch yourself, and some business will come up. And it does. If you go to enough events and you go with your pitch and you talk to people, it'll happen. But then what happens is you do that, you get some clients, and because you're a solopreneur, you have to go and do the work to serve those clients. So then you don't have the time to go to events. You get a few clients, revenue's good, and then lo and behold, one of those clients leaves for some reason. I love the Jonathan Stark example that he said that, hey, when leadership changes and you're in the middle of a project, be very careful because most of the time the project gets killed. So that happens to a lot to us solopreneurs that we do the work, we drum up business, then we got to serve the business, something falls, and then we got to go. It usually takes a little bit of time to create the pipeline again. So you're in this kind of like feast and famine cycle. That is why you have to do things that compound. For a while, that was content. If you were really good at writing SEO content with topics that nobody was talking about, for example, pricing, answering the difficult questions that nobody else wanted to talk about, listing the best people in the industry, and we used to do that, you could rank pretty quick on Google for really valuable keywords, and then you would have a ton of traffic coming to you, and that would grow over time. Because of AI, that has changed. That playbook it's still working. SEO is still important, but it's not working as quickly because not a lot of the traffic that used to come to your website to answer those questions is now being answered in the AI overviews. So people get the answer. It might be from your content, but they don't see your brand. They don't see your face. They're not in contact with you. What the podcast episode does, if you go on a podcast tour, is that number one, the majority of people listening to business podcasts are executives. Executives that start a podcast, and this is true for all listeners, more than 80% of people that start a podcast episode finish it, which is huge, way more than videos or anything else. The other thing is that executives that listen, or business owners or decision makers that listen to podcasts, most of the time they do it when they're in the gym, when they're driving, or when they're in a plane. So you have their total attention. On top of that, if you say you go on a podcast episode, 30 minutes of the episode, let's say it takes you 30 to 45 minutes to prep. Let's call it 2 hours total per episode. The asymmetry in value that you get from it, it's unmatched. There's nothing like that out there right now because you're building trust. Hopefully, if you did your job correctly and you prep, you're building trust with the host because they saw that you did the work, you came prepared, you have good stories. That alone is super valuable. Because imagine if you build trust with the hosts are seeing a lot of professionals coming. Like you guys have almost 300 episodes. That's 300 business owners, decision makers, executives that might need the service of some of the other guests. So if you build trust with the host, you might get referred. That's number one value. Number two, the audience. There's this weird psychological effect that happens of consistent listeners to a podcast that they get to feel like best friends of the hosts because they listen to the episodes all the time. So they know about them, they know how they think, they know about their life. So there's this weird situation where the listeners of your podcast feel that they know you, so they trust you completely. And that trust can transfer in the episode if the guest does a good job. So, for example, I'm kind of like crashing this party because you guys are doing all the work of posting the episode, editing, putting it out there on all the platforms. And if I do the job correctly, I get to kind of like crash the party, bring a little bit of food and bring something for the party. And that alone creates value for me. And we're not even getting started. Those are just a few of the valuable things. Now, then think about that podcast is going to be, if you're doing a good job of doing evergreen content, it's going to be out there on all the different platforms that AI is going to start referencing. So you have mentions of your expertise in different places, and that gives trust signals to AI. In 1 hour, you're doing all of this. And then if you want to take it up a notch, especially if it's a video podcast, now it's even easier to put it on an AI tool, get 30 clips, then download the transcription, ask AI to write LinkedIn posts and maybe even blogs with that content. And the beauty is that most of the time, you don't even need to review it or approve it if you do it well with the prompting, because it's words that you already said. You agree with it. You don't need to review it. So that's kind of like how we work with executives, and we tell them, I don't need a lot of your time. Just go on the podcast and then I'll do the rest for you. So by going, for example, to just one episode, you could have content for a month. You could have 30 pieces of content or more just from one episode. So again, I'm super biased because it's what we're doing right now, and we'll share the episode, the resource so that people can prepare the stories and be prepared. But on all sides, being on podcasts and having this long form conversations is one of the most valuable things a solopreneur can do. On top of that, they're practicing their stories. They can see themselves. They can see the video. If they have a speaking coach or somebody they're working with to get better, they can send the video. Hey, what feedback would you give me from this interview? What do I need to improve on for my communication skills? So it's just like the asymmetry of value to effort in going into a podcast and doing a good job. In this moment, it's unmatched.
It is so, so, so true. Well, Alejandro, you've been so helpful today. You provided so much wisdom for our audience. And so we end every episode with this question. We ask all of our guests this question. What is your favorite quote about success? We want to know.
I love this question. And I'm going to tell you what it used to be and what it is now. My favorite success quote, and if you ask anybody who knew me from my high school and undergrad days in Venezuela, they would totally know that this is the quote. And it used to be a Vince Lombardi quote: winning isn't the only thing, it's everything.
No, winning isn't everything. Winning isn't everything. Winning is the only thing.
The only thing, right? And I used to be like that, and it was so bad because I wanted to win in board games, in basketball, in everything. And I am sure that, for example, with basketball, people pick me in their team not because they wanted to play with me, but they just don't want to play against me. And I've changed because I listened to Jordan Peterson mention that winning in games is not winning the game, is getting invited to play the game over and over and over again. So that is my mindset now. Whether it is I'm playing pickup basketball, we're playing board games with the family, we are in a conversation and there are ideas floating around. No longer I want to win in the sense of winning the game. I just want people to think that I'm a fun player to whatever game they're playing, whether it's even a professional game, for example, right? Like if you always have to give feedback, if it always needs to be your idea, you're not letting other people get that boost of feeling good about their work. So I would say it used to be winning isn't everything, it's the only thing, but now it is winning is getting invited to play different games with people.
Love it. Well, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or Latinpresarios or anything online?
Well, we are at latinpresarios.com, but for this audience and episode in particular, we're going to build a landing page, and it's likely going to be latinpresarios.com/the Aspiring Solopreneur, where we're going to have the resource that we talked about for any solopreneur to build their 3 key stories that they need to tell on every podcast so that the podcast and the content can turn into a pipeline for them and can compound. So we'll have that in that page. We'll link to some of the valuable insights that we had in the conversation, but people can find me on the website and especially on LinkedIn, Alejandro Sanoja. If they look for it, I'm going to be there, and I'm always open to having conversations and helping other solopreneurs because I know it's not an easy path to walk. It can be very lonely sometimes. And I love what you're all doing to create a community for solopreneurs. Find me on LinkedIn. We'll have a conversation and we can take it from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, leave that 5-star review. It helps us spread the word to other solopreneurs trying to live a life first business. Share this episode with a friend and subscribe to our show, on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. And we'll see you next week on the Aspiring Solopreneur.